Just to really quickly introduce the panel, so directly to my left is Tracey Rembert, the Assistant Director of Catholic Responsible Investing, CBIS. We then have Anna Pott, Manager of Responsible Investments, APG Asset Management. Next to her is Lara Yacob. Did I say that right?
Yeah, you did.
All right. Regional Coordinator, North America, UNEP Finance Initiative. And then all the way at the other end, as a bookend, is Manuel Lewin, Head of Responsible Investment for the Zurich Insurance Company. So just really quickly, to give you a sense of the perspectives you're going to hear, you'll have a asset manager, ecosystem player, and asset owner, just to give a little context. Okay, so why are we talking about this? Well, as we heard yesterday, there is any number of proliferation of investment impact metrics and tools that are being developed. Sustainability reporting guidelines like the GRI, impact and sustainability metrics like the impact reporting and investment standards IRIS, and SASB. We heard about SASB a lot. Ratings and analytical tools like GIRS, B impact assessments, B analytics, B Corp certification. And then you have all this research data coming out from Bloomberg, Thomson Reuters, Morningstar, MSCI, Sustainalytics. More recently, and this is some of the work that we've been doing at the Investment Integration Project, is we're seeing that a whole host of asset owners and asset managers are going even further. They're starting to think about the systems level impacts of their portfolio level decision making. And a lot of this is getting motivated by crisis, and so risk mitigation in one sense. So you look at what happened with the financial crisis, you look at the whole social unrest and during the Arab Spring destabilizing the entire region for investing. You also see a positive result of it too, where you see investors beginning to invest in things like mobile phone technologies that lift entire regions, entire communities. Think of development of vaccines that can literally change the course of a country. At the same time, we're seeing, not just at an investor level, but a number of ecosystem players from the PRI focusing on systemic risk. You have the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, UNEP's initiative around sustainable development and designing a sustainable financial system, High Meadows Institute, Future Capital Markets Program, the GENS campaign around the Sustainable Development Goals, really focused on impact investors getting into the space. And ICGN's global stewardship principles, and lastly, not lastly, but just another example, focusing capital on the long-term global initiative that recently relaunched. So the question becomes, why? Why is all this activity around non-financial performance and measurement occurring? And really what's motivating the interest going forward? So I'm going to pause there, and I'm going to bring Tracey in and basically give us a word about where you sit within the market, and then talk a little bit about, given the nature of the clientele that you represent, give me a nature of the interest and motivating factors that you're seeing.
Well, Christian Brothers Investment Services, CBIS, was started in 1981. So we've had a while to think about how these issues are playing out. And we represent 1,000 Catholic institutions globally. A lot of the work that we do has been on engagement, screening, proxy voting in the past. But increasingly, we're getting more and more interest from, what is our money doing in the world? How does that connect back to Laudato Si and, core Catholic social teaching? We have a lot of frameworks to guide us going back to 1986 with economic justice for all, which was, kind of a rallying cry of bringing morals and principles and care for the poor and the vulnerable into economic decision making, which includes obviously, investment decisions. So we've had a lot of frameworks of guidance of looking more systemically than, say, risk at a particular company or trends at a particular company, but how are investments overall playing out across, what impacts are they having on the most vulnerable populations that Catholics care about? Now we come to present day. We've had this previous activity and we're at this new moment of how do you really start measuring what finance is doing, what your own investments are doing, how this is playing out in the world. And we have been looking at the impacts of and the outcomes of our engagements with companies and policymakers for a while. and clearly feel the need to really get more sophisticated and complex and upping our game in terms of how we measure the impact just from things like engagement, screening, proxy voting, for instance. Then you also have to take a step back and look at what are the issues that are really guiding us in terms of Catholic social teaching, the underpinnings of a lot of the work we do, even on engagement currently, and how is this going to play out over time in terms of presenting real systemic risk, real volatility to all of our investments? Because we are a universal owner. You know, we have over 2,000 companies across, you know, dozens of countries that we're invested in, across every industry imaginable. And you have to start thinking, you know, what steps do we need to put in place now? How do we need to galvanize not only ourselves but other institutions to actually get the framework right to be able to measure the impacts that we know our clients are already asking for, but that are absolutely imperative to start measuring, say, in the next 10 years window because of the systemic risk that they might actually bring to the underpinnings of the economy. So when I look at, everyone talks about impact measurement. We have to do this, we have to do that. And the more you start thinking about it, it's not a linear exercise of measuring this impact at this company and then rolling that up on a portfolio level. All of these things are very interconnected. So when I think about like where we really need to be 10 years from now in terms of impact measurement, impact assessment, not just looking at outputs, but what is the money really doing? What good is it doing in the world? How does that connect back to the 17 SDGs, for instance? I think we have to start by all of us actually working collectively to solve a couple of core issues. So one is disclosure. Totally non-sexy. People don't pay a lot of attention to it, but it's absolutely like, you know, the underpinning of our economy. We have to have good information and good data. And pretty much all of you in the room know the work that's been done for many years on ESG reporting standards. We've got SASB with a focus on materiality at the sector level. We've got GRI coming up with new and, you know, better ways to look at what should be measured. You've got stock exchanges. You've got people clamoring the SEC for more and more transparency, but we still don't have consistency. We still don't have comparability. We still don't have small cap disclosure to a large extent. And so we all have to actually focus on solving at least some core metrics, core KPIs, core performance indicators around, ES and G variables, I think, to start going to the next level. The second is, now I finally really got into, now I'll wake everybody up that didn't get the coffee, which is fantastic. The second is, we need to step back, I think, from this discussion of the big M, materiality. I know we need to solve that. Everyone's been focused on SASB and scoping out materiality by sector. We absolutely have to have that information. But we can't lose sight, I think, of just focusing on the M. Because we are universal owners. We can't just look at what's happening at one company because all these other macro trends, obviously, that are taking place in the world are impacting that company, whether that company has excellent performance or not, whether they are managing well all of their material factors or not. We have to look at these kind of mega issues that could really disrupt our portfolio overall, not just, the controversies that might happen with fossil fuels or this company or Wells Fargo or whatever the controversy of the day is, and we always have a controversy of the day. Just read the papers. I think we need to step back and, Steve Leidenberg's done some great work. The UNEP inquiry on a sustainable financial system has done some great work. What are those 5 or 6 things that, if they don't go well, really will cause major volatility, the destabilization of democracies, of our financial infrastructure? And maybe that's the place we actually start. And I know that's going to differ a little bit depending on who your beneficiaries are and what they're pressuring you to do to measure, to show impact on. But I think there's going to be a lot of commonality there. Whether you're Catholic or you're an insurance company or you're a Dutch asset owner, asset manager, people care about disease and health indicators. They care about water and sanitation. They care about the systemic risk from climate change. They care about good jobs, good wages. There are some basic things that if you don't solve those, then you're going to have instability. You're going to have mass migrations of people. You're going to have natural resource shortages, which are going to lead to armed conflict, all these things of which are not good for consistency and lower volatility in our portfolios. And then the third thing is in this conversation, we talked about how should we move beyond financial measures, things like GDP and job creation and all that. We need to decide for ourselves, I think, that we need to go on one of two trajectories. We either need to have a conversation and raise it to a level of sufficiency that people hear us about new measurements that should be incorporated in GDP that actually get at some of these issues that we're actually concerned about at a systemic level, at an industry level, at a regional level. Or we need to kind of redefine some of the core financial metrics for ourselves and start driving those. We either redefine GDP, we redefine what should actually be in like unemployment figures, for instance, or housing starts, or all those core things that everyone's always looking to pay attention to when they come out. So we've got one of two. We could redefine these things, and eventually they will probably bleed into the mainstream measurements that are in existence now. Or we say, look, the measurements are not including the externalities that we look at, that we care about. They're not including the things that actually should be measured to give us good fine-tuning on what's happening in the economy. And only a handful of folks, largely in Europe, do I see ever raising this conversation. But if we don't start raising it now, this is probably going to be a 5 or 10 year conversation as it is. And we will run out of time, I think, to actually be able to get the data right, be able to start measuring the impact before it's too late. I don't really want to be here 20 years from now in Bloomberg talking about, we still need to solve ESG indicator disclosure. There's some things that we have to actually move now, I think, in order to really ramp up 5 and 10 years from now, or it's going to be a mess.
So I see you shaking your head quite vigorously over there, Anna. Would you like to jump in and maybe talk a little bit, remind everyone where you sit in the market, and talk a little bit how a lot of the dimensions she's raising are reflected in your own work?
Yeah, thank you. And I want to follow up on your point about the trajectories that you're talking about in my third point. Before I start, I work for APG. APG stands for All Pensions Group. We are a Dutch asset manager for pension funds in the Netherlands. We represent the pension fund for the education and government personnel sector and workers in the construction sector. I wanted to kick off this discussion with 3 drivers for responsible investment that for us, our organization, is working on responsible investment since 2008, are important. And the last one is about these trajectories, finding these common trajectories. So 3 points, 3 drivers for us on responsible investment. The first point, I already mentioned it, it's the beneficiaries in the schemes. It's the people whose money, whose savings we are taking care of. I know it sounds straightforward, but we often tend to forget. It's not our money, it's their money. It's their hard work put into that. So we need to listen to them. And if we listen to them, we hear they find these things are important. They want their savings be invested in a responsible and sustainable manner. The first driver, what we need to do with that is, again, listen. Listen what they want. Listen what they feel. And in order to do that right, we need to show them how we invest. Again, such a straightforward thing, but often, we all know the language that is used in the financial sectors and asset management is about structures, it's about strategies. The people in our schemes, they just want to know, what are you investing my money in? And how? What are the decisions? And yes, some of them, and many of them, think we should do that in a sustainable and responsible manner. But first of all, they want to know, what is it that you invest in? So that's the first driver that I want to highlight here. Our people in the schemes think, they care about this. The second driver for responsible investment in our case is it matters. It makes our investment decisions better if we also consider non-financial factors, if we also take into account the social and environmental and governance factors. We've seen that recently there was this study from Barclays about fixed income and ESG that was based on data from MSCI and Sustainalytics that really resonated well with the professionals in our organization, really showing again that it matters also in terms of making better investment decisions. But most important, it's these investment professionals, these experts, these portfolio managers and analysts that I'm working with on a daily basis. They care about it. They think it's important. And they think it's fun to work with this. Recently, myself, I moved from our offices in Amsterdam to work here with our New York-based teams. Does it work well? Yeah? Okay. These fixed income team, getting them to grips with the new policy that we have developed and, making sure that it's rightly embedded in the organization. And I'm working with these people, with these analysts, this financial sector analyst, working on governance items in a bank, having them, he went on this call with the chairman and CEO of this bank, talking about these governance issues directly with management. He came out of this call so energetic and, wow, this is very important. The other day I was working with our fixed income analyst on an energy company that has some issues with a pipeline that sure you've heard about. These things are important. And it's not an ESG team or a responsible investment team in a faraway country. It's these people who are making these investment decisions who care about this. It's important. It's important for their investment decisions and the processes, but it's also important for them as a person. So we need to focus on that. We know it's fun to be in sessions like this, but the word ESG in the integration, I think it's highly overvalued and overrated and used in the wrong way, because we all say we do, but to be honest, there's a lot more work to be done there. So our focus should be internally, work with the teams, work with the investment teams, work with the professionals, with the analysts and the portfolio managers, and then enable them, equip them, encourage them, help them to really do it. That's about policies, systems, it's about having the right data in place that is reliable and accurate. But a lot is about just do it. Working with them on a daily basis, find their values, find their weak spot. Where can we work together and where can you make the difference? Because it helps, in the end, the investment decisions that we are making for the people in the scheme. So that's the second point, the investment decisions and the portfolio managers that we need to work with. The third driver for responsible investment, and that relates to your point, is about our common future. We need to have a world that we can invest in also tomorrow that's sustainable and worth to invest in. Otherwise, again, the people in the scheme don't have any return on their investments. And in order to do that, we need to work together. We need to work together with the portfolio companies to help them, build more sustainable business models. We need to work together with policymakers to have good policies and schemes in place. And we need to work together with our peer investors. Where can we find these trajectories that you were talking about? Where can we, collaboratively make a difference? Because yes, APG, we're quite a large institutional investor, but still we cannot do it alone.
Great. So we've now heard from two asset managers. I would love to throw it to Manuel and give us the asset owner perspective. What is motivating interest for you guys in terms of the work you're doing on thinking about non-financial factors? Maybe talk a little bit about the kind of practical application. How are you beginning to mobilize this strategy?
Sure. Thank you, Bill. And first of all, let me thank the organizers for hosting us all here today and inviting me to the panel. It's a great pleasure to be at this event again. Look, you asked the question why. I say why not? If we can invest, generate a return, and on top of that have a positive impact, if we can have the cake and eat it too, why would we not? We'd be stupid to pass on that opportunity. But look, I mean, let me maybe just take a quick step back, just talk a little bit about the organization and give people a little bit of context. So, as you pointed out, we're an asset owner. We're a large global insurance company. We manage about $200 billion in general account assets. So in our case, the ultimate beneficiary in a way is really is our shareholders. To a certain degree, also our policyholders, where risks are shared sometimes. So I think we generally view ourselves as an asset owner managing the assets on behalf of our shareholders and on behalf of our policyholders. And as a responsible investor, there are really two things that we have over the past couple of years embedded as deep as we possibly could, just in our overall investment approach. The first one is just ESG integration, and I'd love to have a separate conversation with you and prove why we're maybe a little bit further ahead, not just us, but as a market, as maybe you think we are. And the second one is impact investing. So where can we be very intentional, very targeted in creating positive social and environmental outcomes, measure them, and do it at a return that compensates us for our risk. So those are kind of those two elements. Now, why would we care about impact? In a way, if we're not gaining any return, why would we go to any extra effort to think about impact? And again, I think Anna, you hit the nail on the head on the end. It's because people care. Most people generally care, and what we certainly see, was our employees. It is working for a company that manages assets in a way that generally has a positive impact. It engages people. It helps us attract people. There's lots of anecdotal little stories of people who bring this up in interviews. But people to apply to work with Zurich because of the responsible investment stuff that we do. And quite frankly, that's what gets me out of bed in the morning. I mean, that's really the rewarding stuff. But it goes beyond that. I think as not just as an investor, but as an insurance company, I think the way we think about our corporate responsibility is, look, we need to do well, and we need to do good business, but we also need to have a positive impact on our communities and the environment, on society. So where can we combine those two? So that's kind of the slightly longer answer to why we do that. Why is now the right time to do it? I think is another part of the why question, and there are really four things that we observe and that make us believe that there's going to be more opportunity around impact. I think the first one is the SDG, and I'm sure we're going to hear much more about that. But I think for the first time there's kind of now an overarching framework that allows people who come at the topic of impact from very different places to think about it in a common context. And we see a lot of asset managers and folks who've done work on impact now trying to align what they're doing with the SDG. So there's some real momentum, I believe, around the SDG. The second thing is millennials. And I think it's not so much that millennials inherently care more than previous generations. I think when people are young and enthusiastic, they care, and that's just the generation that's young now. But I do think there's a genuinely different attitude in terms of what they expect in terms of transparency. They just want to know much more stuff because they can, and because they've gotten used to get all this information and to get it for free. I think that's the second thing. The third thing I think is data and big data, and the fact that there are now new and different ways to think about how you can measure impact than just a few years ago. And I'm not saying this is like this is like stuff that's ready, but I think these are things that we see happening that we believe will make it easier over the next over the coming years to think creatively about how you could measure impact. And last but not least, I think we've traditionally impact investing has been a niche even within responsible investment, and it's been kind of confined to the obscure corners of private markets, accessible to only very sophisticated investors, basically. I think we've started to see the first kind of legit and genuine forays of the notion of impact into the more listed space. For us, we're an insurance investor, 85% of our portfolio is fixed income. The natural starting place was to look at things like green bonds or social bonds. We're also doing the private equity stuff and when investing in fish rearing farms in Nigeria, a bit more funky. But kind of the mainstream part of the portfolio, I think there's now some genuine ways to do that. So I think for us it makes sense to do it. It's the right time to think even more about it now than just a few years ago. And the last thing I would say, maybe tying it back a little bit to the ESG integration. For us, ESG integration is about the big M, Tracey, that you don't want us to focus on exclusively. And I definitely agree with that. But first and foremost, for us, ESG integration is about risk and opportunity. There is an underlying notion that by doing that, by integrating ESG, by putting a price tag on these issues, it will have a positive impact. It will change the incentive system over time. It will force everyone who looks to raise capital in the market to think more strategically about environmental, social, and governance issues. So even though it's inherently about financial materiality, we believe there is an impact, but we have no way to show this, to prove this, to measure this. But again, because of kind of these trends that we're seeing now, I think we're starting to think about maybe we can think about whether we could measure the impact of not just the dedicated impact allocations, but a broader portfolio. Maybe we can. 2 years ago, I would have thought conceptually it makes sense, but there's nothing really we can do to show that. But I think we're getting to a stage where we can start thinking about that.
Okay. So before I bring Lara in, because I want her to give us, she's doing very interesting work, giving us kind of where we need to be thinking going forward. I want to bring you back in, Tracey. In terms of that, how is this all filtering into your work? So as a manager of managers, how do you guys approach it at a more practical level?
So, like I said before, for some reason this doesn't sound as loud.
Can everybody hear us okay? Yeah?
Our focus has been typically on screening proxy voting and engagement, and a lot of resources on engagement, a lot of activity, and continued upping the ante or the game, in terms of improving what we're doing. Is it effective? Are we targeting in the right way? We are guided by, obviously, 3 core kind of pillars or principles that shape our engagement work. So economic justice, environmental stewardship, and human dignity, all from Catholic social teaching and other frameworks. That those are the priorities of our clients, our beneficiaries. But within that, so you can actually measure impact on engagement and all quite well, I think, in fixed income and equities. And we've been doing it mostly in equities. We're just starting now. We joined the PRI fixed income working group, or the corporate bond working group, to really dig in on what best practice is with engagement and outcomes in the fixed income space. That's where our holdings are in equity and fixed income. We don't have a lot of private equity vehicles and other things, but we are looking at new products that might address the impact space and what does that look like. But as a manager of managers too, we have largely focused our time and attention on where can we heighten the conversation, not just amongst other religious investors, but globally our peers. Like, what are people not paying attention to? And we better be a loud voice to make sure people are actually understanding what's going on with human trafficking and slavery and child labor and all these issues. It's not just about climate change. It's not just about water. There are other issues that are really horrific that investment is helping to perpetrate. So what role can we play there? We're a member of the Interfaith Center on Corporate Responsibility. They have a hierarchy of impact, looking at a company by company level, whether or not you're actually making a difference in terms of your engagement with companies. But again, that's at the company level. If you step back then and you're looking kind of portfolio wide, well, what can you do? There are things that we're totally in like an experimental stage, I think, right now. We're looking at all kinds of plans around impact assessment and what else can we do on engagement. How else do we magnify our proxy voting, which we take very, very seriously. And there are a number of things, right? So we can, with the data that's available now, we can start to score individual companies on issues or overall. We can score funds. We can score fund managers, like the conversation yesterday. We can obviously measure impact on engagement. We can measure the impact maybe on screening. What impact is our proxy voting doing? What impact is our policy work doing, which is really critical on a lot of these issues. We have to have policy frameworks that give us and companies some certainty for investments to happen, for impact investments and other kinds of investments. You can do SDG alignment. And the thing with our focus, you look at the 17 SDGs and Catholics care about those issues. Solving, poverty and dignity and equality and climate change and water resources and, all of that, stabilization of economies are absolutely critical. So I think that's kind of a natural segue. How are your investments, your investment policies, and all of that aligning kind of with the goals of the SDGs. And like I said before, too, the SDGs are the flip side of the SDGs. If we don't solve those things, those are the things that I think will bubble up to create major systemic risk that we should be paying attention to. Income inequality, we know climate change is not just a resources issue or a water issue, it's a national security issue. It's an armed conflict issue in some cases. So, and then, there's enhanced screening, and I think we are trying to figure out, with limited resources, we are $6.5 billion. Where do we go first? And is this a linear exercise of let's measure this, let's measure these priorities, and then start branching out over time? Or do we spend a lot of our time starting to up the ante in terms of having more conversations with our managers and putting the onus on managers to actually show the impact that they might have or how they're taking these issues into account? So I think that there's a lot of opportunity in terms of folks working with their managers to actually just say, look, there are so many things that you could do here. Can you measure these 3 things or these 4 things that we care about? We know some of your other clients care about too. Can you start to bring together forums where we can actually start consolidating thinking about how to measure some of the things that the portfolio is doing, and then you can report that back to us. That would be valuable information. So I think those are conversations that need to happen now if they're not already.
And just one quick anecdote, and I think that's absolutely right. I think you shouldn't be shy to ask. And we've done this for a portfolio of infrastructure loans, which it's not really part of our impact investing. It's just a kind of a broad portfolio of infrastructure lending, and we went to our asset manager, sat together and said, is there a way that we could start thinking maybe about, there's social infrastructure in there, transport infrastructure, could we start collecting, the data must be available, how many people does this shuffle around, how many people are getting schooled, et cetera, can we, work with the operators and get that information? And so the manager, actually they got quite excited about that. They came up with a little framework. We're now getting that data. I absolutely, you should just have this conversation with your managers.
Yeah. Maybe start small so they're not overwhelmed. These 3 things we really care about. Is there a way? Are you paying attention to data that would allow you to measure these 3 things and the positive impact that the investments might have in that space? Start there and then see where you go.
So before we jump to Laura, Anna, bring you back in. Maybe say a word too about, is your process similar to Tracey's in the sense that you have particular goals and that through various investment activities you're starting to find alignment? Maybe.
Yeah. So, as I said, we started in 2008, and since then I think we've gone through this whole journey of where, starting with an exclusion policy, engagement, ESG integration, building the systems, building the information, enabling the investment teams to really to integrate these factors and this information that's out there. Where last year our clients have adopted a new policy, renewed responsible investment policy. That's, I pick one element out of that, is going from an exclusion policy much more on an inclusion policy, and that requires much more responsibility and accountability from the individual portfolio manager and analyst to really adopt these sustainability items in their processes on a case by case. Every portfolio manager, it's not the ESG integration, ESG team who works on that. No, it's the analyst and the portfolio manager who needs to be able to say, does this company meet our requirements? What's going on there? And how do I value that with the other factors that are impacting my investment decisions? So really bringing that to a next level of ESG integration throughout the whole scale of all our strategies. So not only equities, not only fundamental equities, it's also quant equities, it's also fixed income, but also our other strategies in private equity and infrastructure and real estate. So I know it sounds, it sounds easy, but we all know that's the whole journey that we've gone through. It's about data, it's about all these research, it's about systems, but much more, it's about making sure that we as an organization can do that. And the advantage that I have, the privilege that I have working for APG is that most of the assets are managed in-house. So we have these teams sitting, close to us instead of working with external managers. Also, a major part is about fundamental strategies that really, positions us to really make this next step on really integrating that. The point about measuring impact and how could you show the beneficiaries and our other stakeholders that it really matters, I think that is that's important. We're not there yet, but I agree with your point. We are at a momentum, and we have the tools and the information much more than before out there to help us show it. And we are working together with our with other investors, in particular in the Netherlands and Sweden, to have this joint approach on what is impact investing. So we have one of the goals of this new policy is that we want to allocate more on what we call sustainable development investments, linking to the sustainable development goals. But it's all about what is it and how could you show that it is indeed a sustainable development investment. And it matters if we do it, we develop as APG H10, but it makes much more sense to do it together. And that's why we're working in partnership with PGM and other funds to have define a common methodology to measure what it is. If we talk about sustainable development investments, and they talk about sustainable development investments, then we're talking about the same thing.
Right. So we have a better sense of why folks are beginning to go beyond financial performance as a measurement. We have a sense of how folks are attempting to do it. So I want to bring Lara in now to talk a little bit about what you guys are seeing at a kind of more macro level, and what that suggests about where the field might need to go looking forward.
Great. Thanks, Bill. And thanks, Anna, for that brilliant tee-up on SDGs. So a few words about the... This is always so awkward.
Yeah,
it is? It's
yeah.
okay? Yeah. Great. A few words about the organization I work for those that don't know, the UNEP Finance Initiative. It's celebrating its 25-year anniversary. It's a membership-based organization, so we're actually part of UN Environment Program. We consist of over 200 members globally, covering the three sectors of banking, investment, insurance, across asset classes. And I would say our members are characterized as being leaders in their fields on sustainable investment, sustainable finance. And I know Tracey doesn't like the M word, but I'm going to go back and say, a lot of the early work of UNEP FI and a lot of these membership-based organizations and coalitions has been on trying to understand materiality of externalities, analyzing the risk, trying to quantify the impacts at a portfolio level. And by and large, I think that the work needs to continue within our own membership based on the work that we do at UNEP FI. That work will continue. But we also see a real growing awareness among the financial industry and development organizations that we have an absolutely massive financing gap to meet for social, environmental, and economic development goals. And as a UN agency, our primary remit, our primary lens for addressing these goals is the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. But we also recognize and agree that trying to meet this financing gap has been really hindered by very unattractive risk and return profiles, the risks associated with trying to invest in some of these opportunities, the lack of investable opportunities. I mean, all of these were sort of touched on as impediments in yesterday's panel. And so I really see a lot of opportunity in sort of, one, trying to create the capacity needed to meet this financing gap. And just as a sort of fact, in the area that I used to work in previously, conservation finance, we estimated the amount to meet the kind of conservation goals associated with the SDGs as being about 300 billion. So that just gives you an idea of, we have 17 SDGs. The challenge is quite, massive. The other trend that we see among our members is, well, not just members, but the FIs is, investors have really led the way in impact investing over the last few years. And I think consequently impact measurement and assessment. So, a lot of the work that Jin has done that many of you are very familiar with around performance metrics has been really great. But we also see growing awareness among other sectors like banks and the insurance sectors to try to get into this space. But obviously, they face the same challenges of, what do we invest in? How do we measure impact? Do we really have the capacity needed to start getting into these spaces? So, I see a lot of movement over the last few years among, well, particularly Dutch banks, because I came from that sector for many years. Rabobank, ABN AMRO, starting to provide are creating business lines to bridge the financing gaps to clients in very traditionally difficult to finance areas like smallholder agriculture or export finance. And even among insurance companies, many of our members are insurance companies and have signed up to principles like, the Principles for Sustainable Insurance. They also have had this kind of aha moment this year. The International Association for Insurance Supervisors released a report putting access and affordability at the top of their agenda. So this goes to the heart, I think, of inclusive insurance and really the SDGs. So really, at the end of the day, there's a clear case for these sectors to continue to be in this area. But obviously, as Tracey, Anna, and Manuel, and Bill, and others have pointed out, there are clear impediments, not least of which are the investable opportunities, the scalable opportunities. And what I would like to kind of highlight in the remaining time that we have is really around capacity constraints and how bringing together, and Tracey mentioned this, sort of creating platforms or forums where we bring together all of these different types of initiatives to understand what tools and methodologies are available, what, how do we define impact, how we measure impact, that's kind of needed. So, kind of a final thought on this is, it's clear there's really a lot of fragmentation in the market, and we need to start bringing things together. So one of the first steps that we took as an institution, obviously led by our membership base and leaders in this space by banks such as Societe Generale in 2015, we released the Positive Impact Manifesto, which is really a broad framework to help build capacity around financing sustainable development goals. And the manifesto kind of laid out a few, I would say, principles or needs that FIs need to address, and that's unmet needs must become a source of a profitable market. A new form of interaction is needed between finance, the broader private sector, and the public sector, and we need a holistic approach that simultaneously considers social, environmental, and economic factors. So this is something that I think we all agree on. But then how to operationalize it, because having a manifesto is great, but obviously you need the breadth of activities that kind of underpin the values that we all have come together and agree on. So what we did over the last year was translate this manifesto into a set of principles for positive impact. So we released these principles. There are 4 principles. The consultation paper is out for discussion, and we're in the process of developing a kind of scoping and grounding paper that will be launched in January at Davos. And there's kind of 2 main drivers or goals behind this body of work, and that first one is to help the finance community translate the SDG issues into their day-to-day analysis and decision-making. So that really goes to what Anna was saying about, we all want to come together and agree on a set course so we all speak the same language, but how do we do that on our everyday so it actually makes sense to our investment managers and ESG folks. And that's also about identifying and evaluating positive impact activities and entities and opportunities. And the second aim of the principles is really about helping set a broader public and private agenda for stakeholders to understand which financial instruments actually can deliver positive impact to meet the SDGs. So we set about, I mentioned 4 principles to kind of clearly define these principles. One is around defining impact. So that's principle 1. And we've created working groups within UNEP FI to help steer the course and bringing together all of these different definitions around defining impact. Principle 2 is around delivering positive impact finance. So the delivery requires specific methodologies, processes, and tools to identify and monitor impacts. And again, it's really not recreating the wheel. It's about bringing together what's been happening in the market, bringing together all of the different market players to help understand what are sort of the basis that we agree on as being good methodologies to go forward, but at the same time maybe creating new methodologies to start elevating some of this work. The third principle is disclosing positive impact finance. Again, for the last day and every other panel I've been on and participated in for months has been disclosure, disclosure, disclosure. And I think the FSB report on the 14th will be hopefully a good, I think, incentive, a kick in the pants for this work. So we really see transparency and disclosure as being paramount for realizing the goals that we want to see. The fourth principle is around assessing positive impact finance, and that should be at the level of assessing what is the intended impact. What is the kind of broader societal, economic, environmental goal that we want to assess. I think what I want to, and because we have 4 minutes and 50 seconds left, is to say, these principles are out there, they're in consultation. I encourage you to go and have a look at them. I encourage you, if you're a UNEP FI member, to really get involved, and if not, find a way to get involved. And I hope that, this is going to be a set of principles that all FIs can start coalescing around and adopting in their investor or insurance or financing statements going forward. That's it.
Thank you, Laura.
Yeah, sure.
So I want to throw it to you guys. I'm sure there are tons of questions, right? So we didn't get into, are there alternatives to the SDGs that we should be thinking about? What are the obstacles, challenges, things that they're encountering when they're implementing? So let's start over here. Maybe say who you are.
Good morning. This is Diederik Timmer of Sustainalytics. Thank you for this very interesting panel. It's my experience in the day-to-day that making these new commitments and trying to do impact measurement, and it just adds a lot to the agenda. And I know that every one of you here sitting on the stage is actually extremely busy as well. So how do you look at the resource requirements for these kind of initiatives? And what are you not going to do if there's not additional resources available to do all these things? Because I think the agenda is just getting bigger and bigger. So thank you.
Does anybody want to tackle that?
Plenty of things we unfortunately can't do. No, look, I think you hit on a very good point, and I would also say that a lot of the things that we've talked about here, you know, it's not like you can go home and do them, right? I mean, there's a lot of aspiration here in the things that you've heard from us. Let's be honest. But look, I think, if you're serious about it, you got to invest. I spend a good amount of my time being part of working groups and collaborative initiatives, and we've heard from Anne about and Tracey about things they're involved in, and obviously that's what you do, right? I mean, to think these things through, and you're only going to get so much out as you put in. I think that's true with everything. So look, we need to. The SDG are really unwieldy. I mean, they're great in coalescing people around kind of a common. I'm saying a common objective, but it's more like 27 common objectives and 170 underlying indicators. It's not something you can take as an investor and then go and measure. It's not geared at investors.
You have to prioritize. Yeah.
So look, I mean, there's right now there's about a good number of different groups trying to come up with frameworks that filter down the SDGs, come up with something that's maybe just 4 or 5 indicators, and you can start somewhere. And if you care about that, you got to be part of it, because these things are being shaped right now. I think if you can sit back, wait until something comes off the shelf. And I know your competitors, MSCI, are they're working on impact focused things. You probably are too. I mean, in a few years there will be solutions. If you want to be part of it, you gotta engage, put the time in. We're part of one specific group. I don't want to belabor that. I think there's a paper about a framework that's available to download for those who are interested. Look at it. Follow up with me if you want, but can't have something for nothing.
And, sorry.
Can I add something? And I really appreciate your intervention, Diederik. The one thing I do want to say is we're not starting from a tabula rasa as well. I think there's a lot already done in the market. And yes, the SDGs are sort of unwieldy just by the sheer fact that we have 17 goals as well. But, I see, for instance, among our members in Canada, Canadian banks, which say, I'm doing a lot on meeting maternal health goals and doing this, but, I think I am, but I'm not really certain, how to kind of measure it and report on it. So, and I know APG has done, you've mentioned PGGM has sort of done a lot. So I think there's a lot there already, and I'm not saying it's going to be solved overnight, but it's really coming together to agree on, even if it's a common definition, is a good first step.
Yeah. Did you want to weigh in real quick?
Yeah. So it's, I think it's 3 things for us. It's, yes, indeed, it's prioritize. It's, deciding to do not certain things. We do that. But the second thing is to work together with, our peers. If we're not doing water engagement, our colleagues in the Netherlands, PGM, is focusing on water engagement. We can tap into each other's agendas. So I think it's very, very important that we can really use our resources as a whole in the most efficient manner. And the third point related to that, using your resources well, it's enable your colleagues in the organization to work on this as well. So where in 2008 my colleague in our ESG team was working on engagement on drilling in the Arctic or environmental issues. No, now it's the portfolio manager who's going to, travels to the Arctic and talks at the AGM and asking all kind of questions about climate change. So it's very important that we exploit the resources that we have well.
And just one quick observation too. I think increasingly as more and more more responsibility gets dumped on us, we have all these things to try to sort out. Increasingly, I think some of the key networks that we're part of, think, an ICCR or some of the CIFs or PRI or the International Corporate Governance Network or ACG, pick your acronym, whatever big network of investors that are coming together focus on a subset of these issues. Increasingly, I think we're going to look to them to help us with some prioritization and identification of gaps. Because we don't want, to go in 100 different directions, but like PRI came together and really focused on climate policy a couple years ago, trying to rally all the troops around a couple core issues, and then fiduciary duty. So we need some of that sometimes. Here are the big issues of the day that we need to solve to move on to step B, and we're calling on all of you. We need to pay attention to those signals too when we do see them from the larger networks that we're involved in.
So do quick, yep.
Yeah, Ken McNeil. I'm with American law firm Sussman Godfrey, and we've worked with various pension funds in the Is it on? Okay, I apologize. We work with various pension funds on fraud issues, and you've got huge amounts of money. I mean, Anna and Manuel, you have, 450 billion? What is it, 400 billion? A lot of money, and you're trying to solve some very difficult problems very quickly around the world. And I was really interested from a European perspective, have y'all figured out ways to guard against the fraud issue when you're investing this money? They're tough projects that you're doing good, but how do you make sure that it's their corruption and so forth doesn't become a problem? I mean, do you have systems for doing that, or how does that work?
So real quick, if Manuel and Anna, you guys want to respond?
Yeah, so it's, how do we know that the companies that we're investing in are not corrupt or not involved in fraud, and how do we know that they're not lying? Well, that's the daily the question every day, right? Are we investing in the right companies, and do we know these companies well enough? That brings question to data, that brings to question to quality of that data, and it brings the question to research. But most importantly, it brings the question to, do we have the right people in-house to ask the right questions at the right time, in the right way, and how do we interpret these answers? That is a challenge, but I feel we are doing good on that. Is there never an issue in any of the companies in our portfolio? No, there is. But we have.
The normal. I mean, is it a tougher problem or is it an easier problem? A normal investment thing? Social.
It's less of a problem since we're better and better every day to cope with that. If an example of a company that we had issues with, we used the data from our external providers, but we had our equity analyst and our credit analyst and our corporate governance specialist from our organization going to this company and having tough conversations with the chairman, following up a whole trajectory of engagement, trying to mitigate these risks. So what I'm trying to say is that yes, it is a problem, it will remain a problem, let's not be naive, but I feel we are better positioned to cope with that and to act on that.
And if you're talking about alignment with the SDGs and increasingly investments in frontier markets, new emerging markets, corruption and bribery is a reality that you're going to have to deal with and solve, and that's where governance comes in. That's where external providers that are doing geopolitical risk and bribery and corruption and Transparency International and all those data feeds come into play in terms of, do we have the right infrastructure on the ground to make sure the money is actually going to do good, is going to contribute to those positive outcomes that we actually are trying to measure and seek. So it's fundamental.
We're getting the seizure light now, so we're going to have to end it on corruption. So thank you guys all for being a great audience. Thank you to the panelists.